Every week, the Payne family cuts straight to the real financial story.
The one question, Bob, everyone's asking is, are we in an artificial intelligence bubble? You've been through boom and bust. What do you think?
No hype, no myths. Just what actually matters to your money.
Does feel very similar to what we experienced in the 90s. Where are we, though? Are we in 1995, 1997, 1999?
Listen to the Pain Points of Wealth on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
The Rita Cosby Show on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
And tonight on the Rita Cosby Show, the protesters in Minneapolis have gone way too far, going into a church in St. Paul over the weekend, busting up a church service. So much so that there were protesters that were screaming really vile, anti-white, I think anti-American, some really horrible things being shouted at people inside that church. And these anti-ICE protesters just think that they can storm anywhere, including a religious service. That, to me, has gone way, way too far. Earlier today, we talked to Professor Dershowitz, and I'm going to play some of his comments, too, as well. But first, this is cut number 40. This is the St. Paul Church. Here's one of the anti-ICE protesters filming himself storming the church and harassing church goers. Take a listen to this.
Shame on you.
Where are you? Where are you? Where are you? Where are your people?
This is the house of
Why
God.
are you not at Whipple every day fighting for the humanity, standing for our people? Where are you? You drink your coffee, you got your jewelry, you have your nice clothes, but what do you do? What do you do to stand for your Somali and Latino communities?
I'm not going to comment.
You have no comment, exactly. As you can see, all these pretend Christians, all these comfortable white people who are living lavish, comfortable lives while children are dragged into concentration camps. You're living real life, nice lives with your lattes, doing absolutely nothing for your Latino and Somali brothers and sisters. You come here to a man wearing a suit. Is a preacher? Did Jesus wear a suit? Did Jesus profit off the words? No! Jesus would dine with immigrants. Do not touch me. Touch me again and see what happens.
Hey, you can't.
You are a fake Christian. Why are you not standing with your Somali and Latino communities? Why do I not see you out at Whipple every day protesting this attack on humanity? Where are you? You're sinners. You're pretending to be Christians. But we know you live an easy life, don't you? A very easy life while people are starving. Living real comfortable while the people starve. Living real comfortable while children are dragged into concentration camps. You're all living real comfortable, aren't you? Shame on you. Do something. Stand with the Somalis. Stand with the Latinos. Quit ignoring this injustice.
That is shocking. Can you imagine being in a church service and suddenly this group of, I consider, very violent, very vile individuals storm in and they're chanting horrible things like that, saying, you're religious people, you're sinners. I mean, it doesn't get any worse than that. And you see these images of these young people, like children were in this church service with their families. It was a Sunday. And you see these kids kind of trembling and hugging their parents. A young boy saying, Daddy, what's going on? What are these people doing? That is absolutely unconstitutional. That is not First Amendment. You don't have the right to storm into a religious facility. These protesters have gone way too far for weeks, and now they have really hit an all-time low. And also among the protesters was Don Lemon, guys, of course, formerly CNN host, who seems to have lost his marbles in a lot of ways. Here is Don Lemon insulting the churchgoers there because he was with the crowd when they stormed the church.
And there's a certain degree of entitlement. I think people who are, in the religious groups like that, it's not the type of Christianity that I practice, but I think that they're entitled, and that entitlement comes from a supremacy, a white supremacy. And they think that this country was built for them, that it is a Christian country, when actually we left England because we wanted religious freedom. It's religious freedom, but only if you're a Christian and only if you're a white male, pretty much. And so, yeah, I absolutely 100%, but it's an intimidation tactic. And, I said, I don't understand how I've become the face of it when I was a journalist. I do understand that I'm the biggest name there. And I'm also, as I was on with my producers this morning, you and Kylie talk all the time. My producers were saying, I said, how did I become the face of this? And my producer said, Don, you're a gay black man in America.
What does that have to do with storming a church? Because he's a gay black man in America. And here he is interviewing a church employee, saying what he thinks of the protest. Take a listen to this.
What do you think of this? I mean, this is unacceptable. It's shameful. It's shameful to interrupt a public gathering of Christians in worship. But there were folks who will say, I have to take care of my flock. Okay, but listen, we live there's a constitution in the First Amendment to freedom of speech and freedom to assemble and protest. Yeah. We're here to worship. We're here to worship Jesus, because that's the hope of these cities. That's the hope of the world, is Jesus Christ. I want to be very respectful. Please don't push me, though. We're here to worship Jesus. Yes. That's why we're here. Yes. Okay, that's why we're here. Okay. That's what we're about. Don't you think Jesus would be understanding we're about and love these folks? We're about spreading the love of Jesus. But did you try to talk to them as a Christian? No one is willing to talk. Okay, I have to take care of my church and my family, so I asked that you actually would also leave this building. You don't want us to chronicle what happened? You're here to worship. I'm always worship. I'm a Christian. We're here to worship. Yeah. We're here to worship. Okay. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Can you imagine? You're there to worship at a church service. And again, let's throw it out. Let's pretend it was a mosque. Can you imagine if protesters burst into a mosque while they were praying? Can you imagine the uproar that you would hear from a Tim Walz or a Jacob Frey? Finally, late today, we heard a very brief comment from Tim Walz. It was very tepid, and it came from his spokesperson, and it was just some mamsy-pamsy. We'll play Jacob Frey's comment in a moment, because he didn't say anything. In fact, he kept saying, it's about love, which is, there's no love when you break into a church or you break into any place of worship. That is absolutely disgusting. They have hit a real all-time low. And I'm glad that the Department of Justice today is looking into it, the Civil Rights Division, because they're seeing if indeed the parishioners' civil rights were violated. Also trespassing. I mean, there's a whole bunch of different things. You do not go into a place of worship and bust up a church service and threaten and intimidate individuals inside a church service. They broke up the service. Everybody went home. Who wants to go back into that church? If suddenly you're going to feel like all these ICE protesters are going to come and shout vile, horrible, disgusting things about you. And here is Don Lemon. You heard Don Lemon talking inside, slamming the church employee, saying, that the protesters that he seemed to be a part of, that they have First Amendment rights. But then afterwards, he thanked the protesters, basically saying they're great and trashed ICE. Listen to this.
People who are wearing the uniform now, you think they're patriots?
I don't think so, especially those ICE agents.
That's what I'm talking
no.
about. Yeah.
Well, no, they're terrorists. They're traitors.
Thank you, guys. Thank you for your service.
Thank you, guys. Thank you for your service. That's Don Lemon thanking the anti-ICE protesters, thanking them for their service. I want to play that one again because it's pretty shocking. He's interviewing the anti-ICE protesters who just disrupted a church service. They're calling ICE traitors. And Don Lemon's response is, thank you for your great service, you wonderful, horrible, vile anti-ICE protesters. Listen to this.
People who are wearing the uniform now, you think they're patriots?
I don't think so, especially those ICE agents.
That's what I'm talking about. Yeah.
Well, no, they're terrorists. They're traitors.
Thank you, guys. Thank you for your service.
Thank you, guys. Thank you for your service. Thank you for disrupting a church service. Thank you for your service. That's what you say to veterans and family members, who go to battle, to strangers who go to battle. That's what you say to the firefighter, the policeman. You don't say it to a bunch of anti-ICE protesters who just invaded a church and terrified young parishioners, young and old, kids crying and screaming. Thank you for your service. The world has gone mad. And here is Jacob Frey, you guys. This is the mayor, of course, of Minneapolis. He was there. Let's not forget he was there in the, quote, summer of love of 2020 when Minneapolis burned to the ground, as was Tim Walz. And remember, also, that was when the police station in Minneapolis also burned to the ground. That was that lovely summer. Well, many people at the Department of Homeland Security are now warning these Minnesota leaders to make sure that doesn't happen again. But if you look at Minneapolis, it looks like a war zone this weekend. Certainly Minneapolis has gotten completely out of control. They were dragging people out of their cars, attacking them. You see them throwing stuff. And again, they're breaking up. Even church services are not sacred. And Jacob Frey did the circuit, as we call it, this weekend. He was on all these different talk shows, on all the different Sunday shows. And a number of them asked him, what do you think about this disruption at the churches? And listen to what he had to say. He used this line, it's inspiring what they're doing, these protesters. It's all about love. Listen to this one.
This is not about safety. What this is about is coming into our city by the thousands and terrorizing people simply because they're Latino or Somali. And people in Minneapolis are speaking up. They're speaking up peacefully. They're standing up for their neighbors. And this is not just about resisting Trump. This is about loving and caring for the people that call this city home. And it's been inspiring.
It's about love and it's inspiring. That's an incredible statement. And then Jacob Frey, not only was he full-hearted supporting the protesters, then, of course, he began taking swipes at ICE.
Minneapolis. Right now, we have about 600 police officers, and they've got 3,000 or so ICE agents and border control. That they are now talking about deploying 1,500 military. This is... Well, it's ridiculous, but we will not be intimidated by the actions of this federal government.
What about being intimidated by people bursting into your church? Get a spine, Jacob Frey, and get a spine, Tim Walz. 1-800-848-9222, 1-800-848-9222. Let's go to Sandra in New Jersey on line 2. Sandra, it really is shocking. This is a real low point, I think, in the form of protests. I'm all for peaceful protests, but the minute you start threatening people, the minute you start impeding ICE, the minute you break into a church and shout these vile, horrible things, I think anybody who believes in free speech, you've lost them. Your thoughts?
Well, two things on this. I want to say, I think there was a time when interrupting a church like they did, that's a felony. And today, when this happened, I felt this was over the line, harassing people who were just minding their own business. You know, Rita, in 1994, you probably read it yourself, there's an act called the Freedom of Access to Clinic Entrance Act, or the FACE Act. And that prohibits this kind of behavior. So they crossed the line here. It's a disgrace. People were crying. They were so frightened, and some kids were crying. So I wanted to mention that. But I really called tonight because of Martin Luther King real quick. You know, my mother, when she passed away, you know, when you have to go to the house and you find things. Well, in my mother's bathroom on the mirror, she had a beautiful picture of Martin Luther King and something he said. He said that love is the only force capable of transforming an enemy into a friend. So, you know, I thought about that. I went to my car to get it today because I know today is Martin Luther King's birthday, and I wanted to speak about that. And we live in a world so divided that this, what he says, matters more than ever, truth and love. Love sees the humanity even when it's been buried by anger and pain. And he also says we should soften our hearts. Our hearts became so hard. Like, where's the softness to people and how they should be feeling? So I just wanted to bring that up to you, Rita, because it's Martin Luther King's birthday.
And do me a favor, Sandra, since it is MLK's birthday, who I think was a tremendous American and one of the most courageous people on this earth. I want to play a little bit of his very famous I Have a Dream speech. Here it is.
I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. I have a dream today.
What a powerful message. And as we were talking, I don't know if you heard you guys earlier when we were on Cants and Cosby, we had Governor Patterson on, and a lot of us were saying that Martin Luther King was obviously somebody who supported protest, but it was peaceful protest. And many people believe that he would not, in any shape or form, agree with these people busting into churches and doing what they're doing against ICE. He was all for working with law enforcement, working with all communities to make the world a better location, not about division and not about going into places of worship and screaming at people and attacking people. That would not have been him. And that's, I think, a very powerful message today that we should look at his words of wisdom that carry on for decades to come, hopefully for centuries upon centuries to come. Sandra, thank you very much. Everybody, we're going to continue your calls after the break. 1-800-848-9222.
The Rita Cosby Show on the Red Apple Podcast Network. It's the Rita Cosby Show.
And the Department of Justice putting out a statement a little bit ago saying the protesters who entered that church in Minnesota will meet, quote, the full force of the law. Good news. Throw the book at them. Let's go to Matt in the Bronx on line 3. Matt, your thoughts tonight?
Well, I want to for you that the Marxists, and that's exactly what they are, the extreme left-wing ideologues that you see out there marching in the streets in Minnesota, advocating that not only the government but ordinary citizens impede the enforcement of the law and deporting these illegal aliens who have broken the law by their very presence in this country is a demonstration not of love for the immigrants or love for people of color, but a hatred of white Americans and a hatred of what is normal, or a hatred of everything that's healthy, and a hatred of the rule of law. And
that's an interesting point. It is certainly a hatred of America because we should all be getting along.
The Rita Cosby Show on the Red Apple Podcast Network. Rita Cosby is on. The Rita Cosby Show presents Back the Blue.
And this Back the Blue segment coming from Little Falls, New York, where New York State Police teamed up with local police to help make a dramatic rescue on ice as a woman and dog had fallen through the ice near a canal. Now, it determined that the woman had been walking her Labrador Bernese Mountain Dog mix when the dog approached the water and fell in. Then the woman immediately attempted to rescue the dog, whereupon she fell into the very frigid waters of the canal, too. Now, once on the scene, New York law enforcement located the woman. They worked to rescue her out of the frigid canal waters and pulled her to safety. At the time they rescued her, her dog was still struggling and beginning to submerge further and further into the waters of the canal. Upon assessing the situation, the trooper and an officer then entered the water. They were able to grab a hold of the woman's dog and successfully secure and rescue the dog to bringing that dog to shore. Thankfully, both the woman and her dog were not seriously injured, thanks to the great work of our men and women in blue. Well, law enforcement is really having a tough time there in Minneapolis. As we know, the police there being told by local leaders, Walz and Frey, that they should stand down, that they cannot assist the feds. So ICE trying to get the worst of the worst off the streets, trying to do heroic work, as we were just talking about from Matt from the Bronx. This is not about love of migrants. This is about love of community. This is about love of getting rid of some of these bad people that came to this country illegally and have committed serious crimes, because that is who ICE is looking for. They're not looking for like grandma who's selling stuff at a fruit stand. So listen first off to some of these anti-ICE protesters. These are fanatics. And they were interrupting that Sunday church service and yelling, talking about Renee Good. That's the woman, remember, who died when it looks like on the video that she stepped on go, the accelerator, and tried to run over the officer who then shot her. So it wasn't like, if you look at the video, it looks like she is disobeying authorities. Here are the protesters shouting justice for Renee.
You're interfering.
Renee Good. 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 Don't shoot! Don't shoot! Don't shoot! Don't shoot! Don't shoot!
Don't shoot? Well, if you're being run over, that's what law enforcement is trained to do, especially if somebody has been harassing them earlier in the day. And yet, here's also the Minneapolis pastor. This is the guy who was in the church. And this is what he had to say about how this environment came to begin with, that people felt emboldened enough to break up a church service.
Absolutely. And I think while the fundamental blame lies on the agitators themselves who chose to do this, who coordinated it, planned it, it was a brazen and intentional invasion. They sat through the first half of the service before disrupting it. I do think that some of the blame lies on Governor Walz and the mayors in Minneapolis and St. Paul, who have been encouraging this sort of lawlessness as these law enforcement is seeking to carry out their lawful mission. The government is responsible to secure the border, to remove illegals. This is a lawful thing to do, and yet the governor of Minnesota has been encouraging them to urgently and loudly protest these actions. And now it's not simply disrupting law enforcement actions, it's following law enforcement agents to their places of worship, harassing their families, scaring their children, anyone who's associated with them, demanding that they denounce them. I mean, these are terrible tactics, and it is shameful that the governor would be so tepid in his condemnation.
That is pretty incredible. And they do feel emboldened, because guess what? You see, Walz essentially turning a blind eye. You see Frey turning a blind eye, both of them encouraging it, calling ICE Gestapo, vilifying ICE, making people feel that they can do whatever the heck they want. And here is senior DOJ advisor, former U.S. attorney in New Jersey, Alina Habba, a longtime Trump attorney, saying the book is going to be thrown at local officials and others tied to this case. Take a listen.
Alina, your reaction to what the AG has said, and that is, we're going to investigate this. Is that the protesters, or is that the mayor and governor for inciting?
That's everybody. That's everybody. The FACE Act is a longstanding federal statute that prohibits force, threats, obstruction, any kind of interference with a religious place of worship. And it carries criminal penalties and violations. And what the Attorney General is saying is the truth. She will come down hard. The Department of Justice will come down hard. Our Civil Rights Division will come down hard on anybody who tries to impede or intimidate somebody in a place of worship or a police officer or an ICE officer. It's just not going to happen in this administration, and Pam is making that very clear.
So the mayor comes out and says they're just speaking up peacefully. They're standing up for their neighbors, and it's not just about resisting Trump. This is about loving and caring for the people that call the city home. Do you feel better about it now?
Okay. Yeah, so we have a mayor who's a Somali sympathizer who we've seen dancing around on stage with their flag instead of an American flag. And I'm supposed to sit here, exactly, and I'm supposed to sit here and believe that that is not creating more hostility, where we have I just spoke with Brian, 200 agents the other night that are leaving their families, going there to keep the peace, to get criminals off the streets, to get people that don't belong here out so that we are a safer country. And they don't even know what they're standing for. And let me also tell you something. The Department of Justice will look into whomever is funding this. It's no different than a RICO action. If you are funding mass protests, if you are having protests that are not righteous protests, there are First Amendment rights that we respect, but that are putting people in risk, not allowing people to go to church, this Department of Justice will come down on you.
I love that. They need to figure out who is backing. If you look at even on social media, you'll see these scenes of like the same person shows up at this pro-Hamas protest on this college campus and then suddenly ends up in Minneapolis or is storming the church there in St. Paul, Minnesota. A lot more than a coincidence. And some of them are wearing the same shirts. They match. They're organized. You also just heard that they waited through half the service. This wasn't some organic thing. This was like totally planned. Don Lemon knew all about it. It was clearly out there all over the place. And you just heard that was Brian Kilmeade asking Alina Habba about what does she think about Jacob Frey, who says this is about loving your neighbor. And Jacob Frey, again, who I said was doing the rounds over the weekend on the media, this is his moment in the sun. Well, he said he has zero regrets of everything he said. And boy, has he said some pretty nasty things about ICE. Take a listen to what he said. He said, nothing I would do differently.
Let me ask you, during those incredibly emotional moments and hours after the shooting of Renee Good, you went on national television and you said to ICE, get the F out of Minneapolis. Do you regret that language? I mean, that doesn't sound like turning the temperature down.
I don't regret it at all. In the moments before I went out there to do that press conference, I learned that Kristi Noem had already jumped to a conclusion as to the ICE agent's conduct, saying that it was purely self-defense. Minutes or hours later, you had her saying that Renee Good was a domestic terrorist. If I seemed like I was angry and frustrated, I was. And part of my responsibility as mayor is to channel what the people in our city are feeling. And the people in our city were angry. They were upset. And at the same time, from the very beginning, we were saying the same thing, which is we got to keep the peace. We're not going to counter Donald Trump's chaos with our own brand of chaos here. Yes, we stand up. Yes, we peacefully protest. And we're not going to go down this route that gives them the excuse to come in with greater numbers. They're looking for an excuse. They're trying to intimidate Minneapolis residents. But I'll tell you, I've seen tens of thousands of people remain composed, to line up to get groceries to people that are scared to go outside, to make sure that people have a walk to their car on their way back home from work. I mean, there have been so many beautiful things that have taken place here in Minneapolis. And I'll tell you, this is another thing to remember. It's January in Minneapolis. It's cold. It's like negative temperatures out there, but people have never felt warmer.
People have never felt warm and cozy there in Minneapolis. It's incredible. No regrets from Jacob Frey as his city is looking like a war zone because he will not condemn violent protesters. They're not peaceful protesters singing Kumbaya. None of them. I don't see that many of them. And in fact, what's really scary is you had the Latin Kings guy who broke into that vehicle, the federal vehicle, And in that particular case, what was really, I think, frightening and alarming about that case especially was when he got into that, he got some assault weapons and he got numbers and information tied to ICE agents. That's really darn right frightening. And then we've also seen over the weekend these images of just residents who are standing their ground, quote, against ICE, not against the criminals, against ICE. And there are a couple different scenes of people in their neighborhoods or in public holding some assault weapons. And that's pretty scary stuff, you guys. 1-800-848-9222, 1-800-848-9222. Let's go to Pat in New Jersey on line 4. Pat, your thoughts tonight?
Hello, Rita. My thoughts are what a hoot that comment was with those officials talking about love and peace.
Right. Love thy neighbor. Love thy neighbor. And the neighbor isn't law enforcement. The neighbor is an illegal criminal and in many cases, gang members.
And Rita, I want to tell you, I go to a Bible-based church, and I know the former police officers that are members there that have retired, and we have security at the entrance, and there will be no rotten piece of garbage bastard that will ever prevent me from going into a house of worship.
Bravo. So now, the question is, and it doesn't look like there was much security at that particular church. Obviously it's a sad state of affairs that churches, especially if you're in the Minneapolis area, it seems like many of them have to have now full-throated security. And after this incident that happened this Sunday, I bet you every single church in that area, every business, that's because there are reports that people who've been driving down the street have seen busted out windows on almost every street there in Minneapolis. That is just horrible. So prevalent, what's going on. And after what happened with this church, you can bet anybody who has, anything of value there in Minneapolis is going to have to hire extra security. How sad is that, Pat?
Rita, I believe they better speed it up to find out where this funding is coming from. It needs to be sped up very quickly because this is out of control. This is everything is out of control.
Yeah, I agree.
And I'm not going to
They need to throw the book at them. You're right, because these are professional protesters. You heard what I said, Pat, too, that if you look even on social media, there are a lot of these posts of similar people that show up in, it's like protest of the day group. And they're clearly getting paid because they somehow don't seem to, the causes don't match. But as long as they get paid and they have their nice little T-shirts that coordinate with some of these others, they seem to show up at all these places. And earlier today, I don't know if you heard on Katz and Cosby, we talked to Peter Schweizer, the great investigative journalist. And Peter has a blockbuster book out. And it's essentially about these backers, Americans, as well as many, many foreigners. And one of the people he talks about is this, I think his name's Neville Singham. And he is an American, but he's now living in China. And she said, Peter said, I think it's upwards, it's almost $100 million. An enormous amount of money that has come in from this Singham group, this individual, he and his wife, donating to these groups that then they're nonprofits that then disseminate, to protest, whether they be in New York or Minneapolis or elsewhere. And if they're funding activity that gets violent, we need to go after those people, as well as obviously the individuals who are, carrying out the violence. But if you break into a church, there's so many things that you can go after. Sandra so eloquently talked about the FACE Act. That's one. The SAFE Act, rather. That is one. The other is obviously trespassing. There's so many civil rights violations, hate crimes you could go after, some of the things they were shouting. I think there's a lot of things. I think you need to throw the book at all these protesters and anybody who backs them. You got to nip it in the butt, right, Pat? I almost feel like it's gone on too long already, by far.
I agree. And Rita, for the blessings that we have for our freedom of religion, we're going to let these pieces of garbage take it away from us or try to. Never happen. I would die first.
Yeah, we cannot surrender. That is for sure. And I brought up the analogy. Imagine if it happened in a mosque. these groups would be going crazy, Pat. I mean, I don't want to see it in any house of worship. It doesn't matter if it's a Muslim house of worship or a Christian house of worship. In any of them, it does not need to happen. The standard needs to be equal, and that's why we need to stand up big time for what happened in this church and say never, ever again. And it can't just be a threat of prosecution. I think they need to throw the book at these people. They got to have their faces. A number of them were seen. Some of them were covered, but a number of them were seen. It's time to really get tough, and not just words, but literally make sure that this does not happen again. And if you give these people a free pass, it will. And it may anyway, but at least it could maybe prevent a number of others potentially. And we need to do this because it's getting really, really bad. Pat, thank you very much. Great points and really wonderful to hear from you. 1-800-848-9222. We'll continue after the break.
The Rita Cosby Show on the Red Apple Podcast Network. This is the Rita Cosby Show.
And coming up on the Rita Cosby Show, we will continue talking about this horrible situation in Minneapolis and the dismal response that we're seeing from officials. Also, lots of talk about the midterm elections and James Carville making a dire prediction for the Republican Party, saying that he thinks it's going to be a wipeout. We'll play that and talk about that. And also, I can't wait to play this clip that I heard recently with my buddy Sean Hannity and Sri Thanodar. That's the guy with the crazy hair there in Michigan who keeps calling for different people to be impeached. She was the one who called for Trump to be impeached and also for others to be impeached. It is just shocking that he will defend illegal criminal migrants, even if they're sexual predators. We'll be playing all that in the next hour. 1-800-848-9222. Let's go to Robert in Brooklyn on line one. Go ahead, Robert.
Thanks for taking my call. Well, it is Martin Luther King Day. Just one quote from him. He said, quote, "The whole world must see that Israel must exist and has a right to exist and is one of the great outposts of democracy in the world," unquote. That's Martin Luther King.
Yeah, he was a big supporter of Israel, huge supporter of Israel.
And an opponent of anti-Semitism. Now, the situation that you have going on is you have a situation where the people who are trying to transform this country versus the people who want to restore this country to traditional American values. And, these same people had no problem with January 6th. January 6th, there was freedom of speech. Maybe some people were guilty of trespassing, but they were treated in the most horrific manner possible, in prison over nothing. And then many of them, it's tremendous legal expenses they had to incur. Meanwhile, these people are violating people's rights, but they don't see it that way because they see this as, well, they're trying to transform America. Now, we have to point out.
But you know what, Robert, the bottom line is also this is just Trump derangement syndrome on steroids because Trump is for it. They're against it. But, you brought up a great analogy because there were a number of people that were prosecuted on January 6th. And believe me, I don't agree with anybody who hit law enforcement or pushed them. But the ones who just walked into the Capitol, that's terrible that they got charged.
Thanks for listening to The Rita Cosby Show. You can hear The Rita Cosby Show weeknights at 10 on 77 WABC. If you like the podcast, share it with your friends and listen anytime at WABCRadio.com and download the WABC Radio app. Hit that subscribe button on all major podcast platforms. Plus, follow WABC on social on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and X. See you next time for a new episode so you never have to wonder.
What the heck is going on here?
Every week, the Payne family cuts straight to the real financial story.
The one question, Bob, everyone's asking is, are we in an artificial intelligence bubble? You've been through boom and bust. What do you think?
No hype, no myths. Just what actually matters to your money.
Does feel very similar to what we experienced in the 90s. Where are we, though? Are we in 1995, 1997, 1999?
Listen to the Pain Points of Wealth on the Red Apple Podcast Network.